The message that stopped Timite was 3:04 in the morning when Sundar's phone buzzed beside his bed. The room was silent except for the faint ticking of a wall clock and the hum of a digital air purifier tucked away in the corner. The city outside was asleep, its towering lights flickering softly like distant stars, trying to whisper secrets to the few who remained awake. But inside that peaceful bedroom, something was about to shift. Something small. Something simple. Yet it would echo deeper than anything Sundar had felt in a long time. He had just turned over in his sleep, his dreams half-formed and fleeting, when the vibration broke the silence. Groggy, he reached for the phone, expecting it to be a calendar. Alert, or perhaps an early morning ping from a colleague in a different time zone. His fingers brushed the screen, eyes squinting at the sudden brightness. And there it was, a message from Alma. "Are you eating enough, Kana?" No emojis, no punctuation, just those 6 words. 6 words that felt like a blanket in a storm, all at once. Sundar sat up slowly, his breath catching somewhere between his throat and his chest. He hadn't spoken to his mother in over a week, not because he didn't want to, but because the days kept slipping through his fingers. Meetings, deadlines, decisions, travel, interviews, his entire life had become a blur of constant movement. Sometimes, even he couldn't remember what city he had woken up in that morning. But this message, this one broke through all of it. He stared at the screen for a long moment. The kind of stare where time pauses, where a million memories flood. Back in waves that rise and crash without warning. He remembered her voice, soft but firm, calling him back inside when he played cricket too long in the sun. He remembered the smell of her sambar boiling on the stove, the way she would cut mangoes for him with absolute care, as if they were the most important fruit in the world. He remembered the nights she would sit on the edge of his bed, oiling his hair and telling him stories of wise kings and mischievous monkeys. He remembered her eyes, gentle, always full of worry and love, especially when he skipped meals to study for exams. And now, decades later, with the world at his fingertips, with power, success, and billions of users relying on him, this was what mattered to her. Are you eating enough, Kana? A simple question. But it carried the weight of everything he had tried to escape from, and everything he secretly missed. He didn't reply right away. Instead, he swung his legs off the bed, letting his feet touch the cool wooden floor. He walked slowly to the window, phone still in hand, and looked out over the sleeping city. The skyline sparkled with artificial light, but none of it felt warm. It felt distant, unreal. He pressed his forehead to the glass dot. Was he eating enough? Truthfully, he didn't know. He remembered coffee. He remembered energy drinks. He remembered skipping lunch during product briefings and grabbing a protein bar before a board meeting. He remembered the taste of airport food and the hollow feeling of late dinners eaten alone while reviewing quarterly metrics. He remembered his assistant reminding him to eat and him brushing it off with a half joke about feeding on data instead of food. His phone buzzed again. I had a dream about you. You look tired. Please take care. He closed his eyes. It was all too much. The pressure, the expectations, the isolation. There were days when he felt like a machine, like a cog in a bigger machine he himself had helped build. He had become the symbol of innovation, of progress, of leadership, but somewhere along the way he had stopped being Sundar. He had become CEO, a title, a headline, a name on earnings calls. But to Amma, he was still just her son. He opened his eyes and looked back at the message. For a moment, he thought of calling her. He imagined her picking up in that little house in Chennai, her voice half asleep, worried that something was wrong. He imagined her sigh of relief when she heard his voice, followed by a lecture wrapped in love. Something about how big people forget small things, like food and how he should listen to her because she's still his mother no matter what. But instead, he typed something slowly, carefully, pausing between each word. I will eat well today. Amma, thank you. I miss you. He pressed send. Then he just stood there, phone in hand, watching the city, watching his reflection in the glass. Not the polished image the world knew. Not the face that appeared on magazine covers or behind conference podiums. Just a tired man, a son, trying to remember what truly mattered. The next morning, Sundar arrived at the Google campus in a quiet mood. His team noticed something different about him. He smiled less, spoke softer, seemed distracted. During a meeting about an upcoming A project, he paused mid-sentence and asked the room if anyone had eaten breakfast. Everyone blinked, confused. Then he asked again, more gently. A few nodded. Some admitted they skipped it. Sundar sighed, nodded, and ended the meeting early, saying, "Go eat. The work can wait. Hunger can't." They laughed at first, unsure if he was serious. But he was, and something shifted that day. He went back to his office and looked around. The sleek furniture, the smart glass walls, the organized chaos of ideas scribbled on digital boards. It all felt too cold, too far from the warmth he had felt reading Amma's message. He reached for his phone again and opened the old photos folder. There she was, young, smiling, holding a bowl of food in one hand and waving with the other, her sari fluttering in the breeze. He stared at it for a long time, then. Without telling anyone, he walked out of his office, down the hall, and into the campus kitchen. The chefs and staff were surprised to see him. He asked for a proper plate of food. Real food, not a smoothie. Not a salad in a box. Just warm rice, dal, and vegetables, something that reminded him of home. He sat alone in the corner and ate, slowly tasting every bite like it was a memory. Someone took a photo without him noticing. It went viral within hours. Google CEO eats lunch alone, reminds everyone to slow down. Headlines popped up. People speculated. Analysts tried to connect the dots, but no one knew the real reason. It wasn't a trend. It wasn't a statement. It was just a man responding to a message from his mother at 3 a.m. That night, when he returned home, he found himself staring at the family photo wall. His mother's face, his father's, younger versions of his sister and himself, all smiling, all frozen in moments that seemed so far away now. He sat on the couch, the lights dim, thinking about how he used to call her every Sunday, how he used to tell her everything. And now, weeks would pass without a word. He hadn't even visited home in over a year. Always too busy. Always another meeting. Always another problem to solve. But what about the problems that didn't make it to his calendar? Like a mother's loneliness? Or a son's drifting heart? He picked up his phone again. This time, he didn't text. He called. Her voice came through, warm and sleepy. "Hello, Sundar?" He didn't speak right away. His throat tightened. Tears stung his eyes, unexpected and uninvited. "Emma," he finally whispered. "Can I come home next week?" The line was quiet for a moment, then soft laughter choked with joy. "Of course, Kenna. I'll make your favorite food." "You still like lemon rice, no?" "I love it," he said, voice cracking. "And I miss you." Outside, the city kept glowing. Inside, Sundar felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. But the peace would not last long, because the next morning, a letter arrived at his desk. Not an email, not a Slack message. A real letter with a wax seal, addressed simply to Mr. Sundar Pichai, CEO. And what was inside that letter would shake everything he thought he knew. Asterisk the letter with no return address. It was 7:13 in the morning when Sundar arrived at his office the next day. The sun had barely risen, but he felt more awake than he had in weeks. A strange sense of clarity followed him like a shadow. His heart was still warm from his late-night call with Amma. He could still hear her laughter in his ears. She had asked him if he was really coming home, and when he said yes, she had grown so quiet that he could feel her smile through the phone. She didn't say much after that. She just whispered, "Then I'll wait." And that was enough. His assistant greeted him with a surprised smile as he stepped in early. She handed him the usual folders, briefings, schedules, sign-offs, but she also handed him something unusual. A brown envelope, thick and stiff, unlike the clean white company letters that usually filled his desk. There was no sender name, no stamp, Just his name in elegant ink. Mir Sundar Pichai. He paused. The paper felt expensive, old-fashioned. The ink had a strange scent, like something written in another time. He looked up at his assistant. Who dropped this? She shook her head. No one saw. It wasn't in the morning mail. It was already sitting there when I came in. Security is checking the cameras. He raised an eyebrow. Thank you, he said, quietly, and took the envelope into his private office. The door clicking shut behind him. The room was silent as he sat at his desk and turned the envelope over in his hands. Something about it felt personal, not threatening, but not casual either. He opened it slowly, gently peeling back the wax seal. Inside was a single handwritten letter. The paper was thick, almost like parchment. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. He began to read. Dear Sundar, I don't know if you'll remember me. I'm writing this not as a stranger, but as someone who owes her entire future to you. Years ago, when I was just a child, you visited my school in Mumbai. It was raining that day. Most people canceled. But you came anyway. You walked in with soaked shoes and a smile, and you talked to us about dreams. You told us that our background doesn't define us. You told us that knowledge was more powerful than wealth, and kindness more valuable than intelligence. That day, I decided I wouldn't give up. I was failing in math. I was too shy to speak. I had no confidence. But I held on to your words like they were a rope tied to the sky. Today, I am a software engineer because of that moment. I work for a startup in Bangalore. We help farmers predict crop patterns using AI. I have never had the chance to thank you. Until now, I know this will sound strange, but your mother played a role too. When you shared a story that day about how she saved for your textbooks by selling her gold bangle, it made me cry. I realized then that behind every successful person is someone who quietly carried the weight for them. So this letter is not just a thank you. It's to thank her. Please, if you visit her soon, give her my love. Tell her she's a hero too. Yours. Sincerely, Sahana Sundar stared at the letter. Hands frozen. He could feel his heart beating in his chest. Not fast, not slow, but heavy. He read the letter again, and then a third time. It was surreal, humbling, and yet something inside him began to an ache he hadn't realized he was carrying. How many lives had he touched without knowing? How many Sahanas were out there? He sat back in his chair, the letter resting on his lap, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something beyond achievement. He felt purpose. Not the corporate kind. Not the mission statement written in brochures. But a real, living, breathing purpose, the kind that came from reaching someone quietly, deeply, without ever expecting a return. He turned to the window, looking out at the morning light breaking across the city. The sky was a dull gold, glowing gently, like a whisper from the universe. He imagined that little girl from years ago, sitting in a crowd of students, shy and unsure, and now writing code. To help farmers. It was unbelievable. He knew he had to find her. Not to thank her, but to meet her. To remind himself what it was all for. But first, he had something more important to do. He picked up his phone and dialed his mother's number again. This time, she answered quickly, as if she had been waiting. He said, voice still thick with emotion. I got a letter today. From a girl named Sahana. Sahana? Her voice was curious. She said she remembers the story you told me about your bangle. She said she became an engineer because of it. There was a pause. Then a soft laugh filled with disbelief and wonder. You see, Kana, Amma said quietly, sometimes the stories we think are small are the ones that change everything. He closed his eyes. I'm coming next week, Amma, he said again. But can I come earlier? How early? She asked. Hopeful, double quotes tomorrow, double quotes this time. There was silence. No words, just the sound of her breath. And then, softly, she said, I'll be waiting. The next morning, Sundar boarded a flight to Chennai without telling anyone but his assistant. No press, no cameras, no itinerary. He wore a simple shirt and jeans, no watch, no gadgets. He didn't even carry his laptop. It felt strange, freeing, like shedding a skin. When he arrived, the air was warm and thick with the smell of jasmine. And diesel. As he stepped out of the airport, memories rushed back in waves. The dusty roads, the honking cars, the laughter of children chasing kites in the street. It was all still there, unchanged, and yet it felt new. He took a cab through familiar streets, watching shopkeepers set up their stalls, women drawing columns outside their doors, elderly men sipping chai and discussing the news. Every corner was a memory. Every building held a piece of him. When the car finally stopped in front of the old house, he froze. It was the same. White walls faded to cream, a rusted gate that still creaked, a bougainvillea bush blooming wild and free. He stepped out slowly, like a boy walking into his childhood again. His mother opened the door before he could knock. She stood there, sari draped neatly, hair tied in a soft bun, eyes brimming with emotion. She looked at him as if she couldn't believe he was real. "You actually came," she whispered. He walked up the steps, arms outstretched. "I'm sorry it took so long." They hugged for a long time. No words. Just silence, tears, and 1,000. Unspoken things passed between them. Inside, the house smelled the same. Turmeric, sandalwood, and something else home. She cooked a full meal. Lemon rice, rasam, potato fry, and curd. Just like old times. He sat cross-legged on the floor, eating with his hands, smiling like a child again. She watched him quietly, as if she was trying to memorize every bite. After lunch, they sat on the veranda, the fan spinning lazily above them. Sundar showed her the letter. She read it slowly, lips moving with every word. When she finished, she held it close to her chest. "This is your real success," she said. "Not the company. Not the fame, this." He nodded. That night, they sat outside under the stars. He lay with his head in her lap, as he had done years ago, while she stroked his hair. He said suddenly. Do you think I forgot how to be human?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said softly, "No, Kana, you didn't forget. You just got busy being everything the world asked of you. But the heart, it never forgets, it just waits." He closed his eyes, letting her words sink deep. He didn't know how long he stayed like that. Hours passed. Time didn't matter anymore. But then, just as the breeze grew cooler, his phone buzzed in his pocket. One message. This time, it wasn't from Amma. He pulled it out slowly and read the screen. "We know about the letter. Meet us at sunrise. Don't bring anyone." There was no name, no contact. No details. His heart pounded. Who were they? And how did they know about Sahana's letter? The peace was gone. Something else was beginning. The meeting at sunrise the next morning arrived quietly. The sky still wrapped in shades of gray-blue, as if the world itself hadn't quite woken up. Sundar sat on the edge of the small wooden cot in the guest room of his childhood home. His mother was still asleep in the next room, her breathing soft and steady. The familiar hum of the ceiling fan above him created a rhythm that reminded him of childhood mornings, except this one felt heavier. The message from the night before haunted his thoughts. It had arrived with no name, no context, and no clue to its sender, just a cryptic invitation to meet at sunrise. His first instinct had been to ignore it, but something about it felt urgent, unsettling, and strangely connected to the letter. From Sahana. How could anyone outside his closest circle even know he had received it? He reached for his phone again and read the message for the 10th time. "We know about the letter. Meet us at sunrise. Don't bring anyone." He hadn't told a soul about the letter except his mother. She wouldn't have said a word. That left only one explanation. Someone had been watching. He dressed in silence, choosing simple clothes, an old cotton shirt and dark pants. No smartwatch, no visible signs of his identity. He left his phone on the bedside table, hesitating for a moment before stepping outside into the stillness of dawn. The streets were empty. Dew clung to the grass and rooftops. A few dogs stirred lazily. The air smelled of wet earth and early morning flowers. The sky, stretching above him, was slowly beginning to bloom with light. He didn't know where to go. The message hadn't specified a location. But as he stepped outside the gate, he saw a young boy waiting on a bicycle, barely a teenager. The boy had dark, alert eyes and held a small envelope in his hand. Without a word, he handed it to Sundar. He opened it quickly, walked to the old temple pond. "We'll find you." Sundar looked up, but the boy had already turned the bike and vanished down the lane. The temple pond was a place he hadn't visited in years. Tucked behind a forgotten corner of the neighborhood, it was once where he and his childhood friends would play, splash water, and chase dragonflies. But now it was mostly deserted, overgrown with moss, silent, abandoned by time. As he walked through narrow alleys, past shuttered shops and sleepy houses, memories whispered from every corner. A broken swing still hung from a tree where he once fell and scraped his knee. A brick wall still carried faded graffiti from their teenage mischief. The past was everywhere. But today it felt like something else was waiting there. When he reached the pond, the sun had just begun to rise. Its golden light skimmed the water, reflecting shadows of old trees leaning gently over the edge. The steps around the pond were cracked. The stone idols near the waterline were worn from decades of prayers and rain. And then he saw them. 3 figures, all standing still, near the far end of the pond. One was a woman, slender, wearing a simple kurta and shawl. The second was a man in his late 30s, with a notebook in his hand and a serious look on his face. The third was a boy, perhaps 20, wearing glasses and looking both nervous and determined. As Sundar approached, the woman stepped forward and spoke first. "Thank you for coming, sir. I'm Rima. This is Dev, and this is Rishi. We know you have questions, but please let us explain." He said nothing at first, just studied their faces. They didn't look like journalists, not government agents, not pranksters either. There was something else in their eyes, urgency, but not fear. "How do you know about the letter?" he asked. Quietly. I nodded. "Because Sahana was my younger sister." Sundar blinked. "Was?" He repeated, his voice barely a whisper. Rima's lips trembled as she reached into her bag and pulled out a small frame. Inside was a photo of a young girl with bright eyes and a wide, gentle smile. "She passed away last month," Rima said, her voice cracking. "A heart condition? She hid it from most of us. She didn't want anyone to think she was weak." The world tilted. Sundar stepped back, the breath knocked out of him. "But the letter," Dev interrupted gently. "She wrote it 2 months ago, before she passed. She gave it to us, told us to find a way to get it to you someday, said it mattered, that you had to know." Sundar's knees felt weak. He sat on the stone step beside the pond, unable to speak. Rishi, the youngest, stepped forward, holding out a small notebook. This was her journal, the last few entries. They were about you and your mother, and what that one school visit did for her. We didn't understand at first, but when we read them, we knew we had to find you. We didn't want media. We didn't want money. We just wanted to honor her last wish. Sundar took the notebook with trembling hands. He opened to the first marked page. "Today I saw a video of Sundar Pichai speaking at a conference." He looked tired, distant. I wondered, does he even know what he gave to us? To me, I want to remind him. I want him to know he changed a life without trying. I want him to feel like a person again, not a CEO. Maybe that will help him remember to smile. A single tear rolled down his cheek. He turned the page. Emma once told me that the people who give the most are often the ones who forget to take care of themselves. I hope he's eating well. I hope his mother still checks on him. Sundar couldn't read anymore. He looked up at them, the sky behind them now glowing gold. She was right, he said, his voice breaking. I forgot to take care of myself. I forgot why I started all this. Rima sat beside him. She didn't blame you. She admired you. We just wanted you to know you mattered to her. And we wanted to give you this. She handed him a small cloth bundle. He opened it slowly. Inside was a copper bracelet, old, worn, handmade. She wore this every day. She said it was her good luck charm. She wanted you to have it. His fingers closed around the bracelet. It was warm, as if holding a part of Sahana's spirit. The silence around them deepened. The birds sang softly in the trees, and for a few moments, they all sat there strangers, connected by a girl who believed in hope and kindness, in invisible threads that bind hearts across time and distance. When Sundar finally stood, he looked at the three of them with a new sense of clarity. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You reminded me of something I lost." Dev nodded. "Don't lose it again." Rima smiled. "She wouldn't let you." They watched him walk away, the bracelet tucked safely in his pocket. The notebook held to his chest like a treasure, but as he turned the corner and disappeared from view, Rishi pulled out his phone. He opened a secure app, and sent a message to someone unknown. He has the bracelet. The timeline is in motion. Asterisk, the bracelet's secret Sundar returned home that afternoon, a quiet daze. The streets of his childhood neighborhood blurring past the car window like faded memories. Inside his pocket, the copper bracelet lay still, but it felt as if it had a pulse of its own, like it held more than metal and warmth. He kept reaching for it, brushing his fingers against its textured surface, as though its presence grounded him. When he arrived at the house, his mother met him at the door, her eyes immediately reading something unspoken. "What happened, Kanna?" she asked softly. He walked in without answering, removed his shoes, and sank into the armchair by the window. For a moment, he didn't say a word. The sunlight filtered through the curtain, casting long lines across the room, and in that stillness, he finally whispered, "She's gone." His mother sat beside him. "The girl who wrote you the letter?" He nodded, eyes glazed. "Her name was Sahana. Her sister and friends gave me this." He opened his palm and revealed the bracelet. Leaned closer, her eyes narrowing as she studied it. Then she blinked, once, twice. A sudden change came over her. "Where did you say you got this from?" she asked, voice unusually firm. "Her sister gave it to me. She said Sahana wore it every day." Alma took the bracelet carefully, holding it between her fingers. Her expression grew distant, like she was seeing something far away. "This," she said slowly, "this isn't an ordinary bracelet. Not to me." Sundar turned toward her, confused. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood, walked to a small wooden chest near the corner of the room one he hadn't seen opened in years, and knelt beside it. She pulled out a small tin box wrapped in a faded red cloth and brought it to the table. She opened it. Inside were old photographs, yellowed with time, torn envelopes, prayer beads, a newspaper, clipping in Tamil, and then, carefully wrapped in tissue, another copper bracelet identical to the one Sundar had received. He whispered, "You have one too?" "Not just have," she said, her voice steady. "I made these." His head tilted in disbelief. "You made them?" She nodded. "Before you were born, when your father was still struggling to find work, I would sit for hours on the veranda, twisting copper into little designs. I learned it from my father. It was a way to earn extra rupees. I made only 20. Everyone was different in detail, but similar in spirit. I sold most of them to buy you baby things. A few I gave away." "Why did you stop?" she sighed. "Because life moved on? Because copper didn't pay much? And because no one wanted handmade things anymore." Sundar stared at the two bracelets side by side now on the table. They looked like twins separated at birth. They were imperfect tiny dents, uneven edges, but beautiful in their simplicity. Raw, human. "How did one of them end up with Sahana?" he asked. And Mama shook her head slowly. "I don't know. But I gave a few to local school teachers. Maybe one passed it down. Maybe it found its way to her." They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of it sinking in. A bracelet made by his mother, decades ago, had traveled through time and hands, ending up on the wrist of a girl who would write him a letter that changed everything. Coincidence? Or something more? His phone buzzed again, pulling him out of his thoughts. He checked the screen. This time, It wasn't cryptic dot from Rishi. The bracelet has a symbol inside. Look closely under sunlight. It's a pattern. His heartbeat quickened. He picked up the bracelet and held it under the beam of light from the window. At first, nothing. But as he tilted it slightly, the edge shimmered faintly. Something was engraved inside, but it had worn down with age. He reached for a magnifying glass from Emma's sewing kit. Under the lens, the shape became clear. A sunburst. Nah, just a sun. But a sun with 9 rays forming a perfect spiral. It was subtle, almost invisible. But deliberate. His mother leaned closer and gasped. That's Appa's symbol. Sundar turned sharply. Your father? Yes, she said, growing more emotional. My father used to carve that symbol into everything he made. He said it was a mark of protection, that it kept energy flowing, but more than that. He said it was a sign of unfinished purpose. Unfinished purpose. Sundar echoed, goosebumps rising on his arms. He believed every soul carried a thread that passed through others. That sometimes, even after we're gone, the work we were meant to do continues through someone else. He made these bracelets as a way of connecting people. He always said, someday these will come back to us. Sundar sat back, heart racing. His mind raced through the possibilities. What were the odds? Sahana's bracelet, made decades ago by his grandfather, had found its way back to him, bringing a message, a purpose, and a legacy he didn't even know he was part of. But why now? Why him? And what was this timeline Rishi had mentioned in his secret message? He opened his phone and dialed Rishi immediately. The call rang. Once. Twice. Then, a shaky voice answered. Hello? Rishi, it's Sundar. We need to talk. Now. There was silence. Then Rishi whispered. I was hoping you'd call. What is this timeline you mentioned? Rishi's voice trembled. It's not something we made up. Sahana believed there was something bigger happening. She had been tracking stories, patterns, lives connected by your grandfather's symbol. She found 3 others with the same bracelet. Different towns, different people, and they all had one thing in common. They said someone changed their life, someone they met only once. Sundar's chest tightened. What kind of people? Retired teacher who started a school for orphans, a mechanic who built a water pump for a drought village, a woman who created a mobile library in rural Bihar. All of them said they were inspired by a stranger, someone who passed through briefly, and gave them something to hold on to. A word, a gift, a story. And they all have this bracelet? Yes. Sahana called it the ripple circle. She said your grandfather must have known something. Maybe not consciously. Maybe he was just following his instinct. But his bracelets found people who turned moments into movements. Sundar stood frozen. Asterisk. She believed you were next, Rishi added. That it wasn't random you got the letter. That the timing was perfect, she said. You would be the one to connect the rest. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Inside, everything felt like it was shifting. Can you meet me again? Sundar asked. Tonight? Rishi hesitated. Yes, but not alone. There's someone you need to meet. Who? Someone who says he met your grandfather 50 years ago. The call ended. Sundar slowly lowered the phone. Across the room, his mother watched him silently. You're not just the CEO of a company anymore, Kenna, she said gently. You're part of something that started long before you were born. He nodded, unsure of what to say, but deep inside, something old was awakening. Not fear, not confusion. A calling. One that started with a bracelet, and a girl who believed in him more than he had believed in himself. Asterisk, the man who knew his grandfather that night. The sky over Chennai was heavy with clouds, the kind that swallowed the stars and carried a quiet electricity. Sundar couldn't shake the feeling that the air itself was waiting, holding its breath for what was to come. He sat in his childhood home, the copper bracelet lying on the table between him and his mother like an unspoken question. The weight of the past day pressed on his chest. Sahana's story, the ripple circle, the mysterious pattern on the bracelet, and now this meeting with someone who claimed to have known his grandfather 50 years ago. It all felt impossible, yet every piece connected too perfectly to dismiss. His mother sat opposite him, her gaze steady but filled with worry. "Be careful, Kana," she said, her voice low. "When old secrets start finding their way back, they can bring both light and shadow. My father, he was not just a man who made bracelets. He carried things inside him he never told anyone. He used to say the past lives and objects. That's why he made them carefully. Every single piece held a story." Sundar touched the bracelet gently, as if afraid it might vanish. You think he meant for this to happen? For me to find all these people? I don't know, she admitted. But I do know this. He believed the smallest act could change the largest fate. If these bracelets have found their way back to you, maybe it's because there's something you need to finish. Something he couldn't. Before Sundar could reply, his phone buzzed. It was Rishi. "We're ready," Rishi's voice said. Soft but urgent. "The man is waiting." Sundar stood, pulling on his shoes, the bracelet still clutched in his hand. Amma reached out, touching his arm. "Take care of your heart, Kana," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Whatever. You here tonight. Remember who you are. You are my son before you are anything else." He nodded and left. The streets were dimly lit as Sundar made his way to the meeting place. Rishi had chosen an old printing press at the edge of the neighborhood, a building that hadn't operated in decades. Its paint peeling, its windows cracked, it still stood tall against the night sky like a forgotten sentinel. As Sundar approached, he noticed the faint flicker of light inside. Rishi was waiting by the door with Rima and Dev. "He's inside," Rishi said quietly, gesturing toward the back room. "He's not someone we found easily. It took weeks. Sahana spoke to him once, years ago. She believed he was the missing link." Sundar followed them through the narrow hallway, past rusted machines and stacks of paper yellowed by time. The air smelled of dust and ink, like history trapped in a box dot, and then he saw the man. He was old. His hair was a storm of white, his skin lined with decades of stories. He sat on a wooden stool leaning slightly on a walking stick, but his eyes, sharp, deep, almost piercing, carried a strength that defied age. When he looked up at Sundar, something flickered in those eyes, as if recognition had sparked. "You look just like him," the old man said, his voice steady, carrying the weight of memory. "Your grandfather." Sundar froze. "You knew him?" "Knew? Him?" The man gave a soft, humorless laugh. "I owe my life to him." The man's name was Karthik. He began to speak, and the room seemed to shrink around his words. "It was the 1970s, he said, and I was just a poor boy working at a workshop in Madurai. Your grandfather, Anandan, used to come there to sell his copper work. He wasn't just making bracelets, he was making something more, something he believed could carry meaning beyond words." "Meaning?" Sundar asked, leaning forward. "What kind of meaning?" Karthik's gaze drifted to the bracelet in Sundar's hand. That symbol, the sunburst. He called it the circle of threads. He believed every person was part of a bigger pattern. When he made these, he would say prayers. He would whisper names. I didn't understand at the time, but he told me once, one day these bracelets will find the right people at the right time. And when they come together, they will light a path no one else can see. Sundar's chest tightened. Did he ever say what that path was? Karthik shook his head slowly. He said it wasn't for him to know. He said it was for those who carried the bracelets to figure out. Dev crossed his arms. So, what does that mean? That all this is destiny? Maybe, Karthik said, shrugging, or maybe it's just a way of saying that we are never as alone as we think. Your grandfather believed that every small act of kindness, a gift, a word, a visit to a child's school ripples through time, like these bracelets. Rima's eyes softened. That sounds like Sahana, she murmured. She believed. The same, Karthik turned to her. Then she understood what most people never do. Sundar sat silently, his mind spinning. His grandfather, a man he barely remembered, had left behind something more than objects. He had left behind a chain of lives, connected, unseen, but powerful. And somehow Sundar was at the center of it now. Why me? Sundar asked suddenly. I have everything people dream of. Why would the bracelets find me? Karthik looked at him for a long time before answering. Because you forgot. Sundar frowned. Forgot what? That you are not your position. Not your title. You are a thread too. You started as a boy with dreams, but now you carry so much weight you don't see the ripple you create. Sahana saw it. Your grandfather saw it. But do you? The question cut through him like a blade. He didn't answer. Outside. A sudden burst of thunder cracked through the air. Rain began to fall slow and heavy, as though the sky itself wanted to wash everything clean. Karthik leaned forward, his eyes burning with quiet urgency. I have one more thing to tell you, he said, voice low. Your grandfather, before he died, he told me something. He said, one day, a letter will find my grandson. When it does, tell him this. The final bracelet is hidden where the sun meets the water. Sundar stared at him. The sun meets the water? What does that mean? Karthik smiled faintly. That is for you to discover. Rima glanced at Sundar. There's a beach not far from here. Could it be? But before she could finish, the door to the press slammed open. 5 men in dark jackets stepped inside, their faces hidden under caps. One of them pointed at Sundar. We need the bracelet, the man said coldly. Now? The room froze. Yes, I whispered. They found us. Sundar's heartbeat thundered in his ears. Who are they? He asked, his voice steady. But low. The man took a step closer, his voice like gravel. Give us the bracelet and no one gets hurt. But Sundar didn't move. Instead, he closed his fist around the copper band. He knew, somehow, that this wasn't just about a piece of metal. It was about everything that had led him here. Sahana, his grandfather, the ripple circle. And he wasn't ready to let it go. Asterisk where the sun meets the water. The room was thick with silence, so tense it felt like time itself had paused. Rain tapped on the rusted windows of the printing press, steady and rhythmic like a countdown. Sundar stood in the center of it all, his hand clenched tightly around the bracelet, his heart hammering against his ribs. The 5 men stood still, but their presence was sharp, invasive. They weren't ordinary thieves. They moved like they knew what they were doing, calculated, trained, coordinated. Beside Sundar, Rima instinctively stepped in front of Rishi, while Dev's jaw clenched, his eyes scanning the room for exits. Karthik, though aged and fragile, didn't flinch. He simply stared at the intruders, eyes cold and unmoving, as though he had seen their kind before. We won't ask again, the tallest man said, stepping forward. The bracelet now. Sundar felt something strange stir within him. Not fear, not pride, but a deep-rooted clarity. In that moment, the bracelet in his palm didn't feel like just copper. It felt alive, woven with memory, sacrifice, and purpose. Sahana's voice echoed in his mind. Maybe that will help him remember to smile. He took a deep breath. You don't even know what this is, he said quietly. The man raised a brow. We know enough. It's a key to something bigger, and we've been waiting a long time for it to resurface. A key? Sundar narrowed his eyes. Yes, the man replied. And you're not the only one looking for it. Dev suddenly pulled Sundar's arm. We have to get out, now. Wait, Rima whispered, pointing to the back of the room. There's a side exit. Behind the stacks. Sundar turned to Karthik, who was still sitting, unmoved. Come with us. But the old man shook his head. I'll hold them off. I've waited 50 years for this. Go. Find the last bracelet. But, Sundar started. Double quotes go. Karthik's voice thundered like a bell. Where the sun meets the water. Don't let this end with me.